UC Berkeley declares that criticism of Black Lives Matters is against their values. Well, of course it is. Why would universities be interested in critical thinking? It's not like they're in the business of education or anything. Conformity at $70,000 a year. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today, we start at Berkeley in California, where the college just announced that any criticism of the Marxist-loving group Black Lives Matter will not be tolerated. Verboten. And yeah, this is the thing that gets me about this story. At universities, we're supposed to be places of contention. We're supposed to be places where we pit ideas against each other. We pat our tenured, pampered butts, pat ourselves on the back about how wonderfully willing we are to challenge. We challenge patriarchy. We challenge the American exceptionalism idea. We challenge our history. We challenge our monuments. We challenge our students. We don't challenge Black Lives Matter. I can't tell you how many times I've heard from my colleagues, it is the job of professors, especially when
is there's
that
a how they sound?
Yes, especially when there's the women, especially when there's a Republican president. It is the job of universities to in the words of Hillary Clinton, dissent is patriotic.
She
right?
sounds too.
We must challenge the dominant ideas that are shaping our culture, unless they're progressive ideas like Black Lives Matter. At that point, you're supposed to roll over like a poor police officer who has been told stand down and let some acne-ridden moron spit in your face about what a racist you are. This is the culture we now inhabited. And I get it. Universities, what Berkeley's is basically telling you now, and the story, as Katie's going to explain to you in a moment, the story, we have a faculty member who is probably a minority faculty member who wrote an anonymous letter to the university saying, hey, there are two sides to Black Lives Matter. You're not reporting it. What does it say? That a minority faculty member at Berkeley can't challenge BLM by using his name. What does that tell you about the circumstance, the ethos of modern public universities?
Well, and we have to remember that, and no one does this, there's a difference between saying Black Lives Matter as just Black Lives Do Matter versus the organization of Black Lives Matter. So it seems to be the key is you have to put a name on something that goes not only with a racist organization, but can go with an actual agreement statement. You just put that on there.
You just made a really great point that Black Lives Matter has got the little trademark by it,
yeah,
right?
it does. Yeah,
so what you're forcing people to say,
yes,
and what you're not allowing them to challenge is a corporate logo.
Yeah.
So we got the idiot women's soccer team who just lost again in federal court about their BS made up lack of getting paid enough money, right? They, and Megan Rapp and Ho, all of them knelt, right? Mm-hmm. And so great, but they're kneeling against a logo. The flag, we're told, is just a corporate logo. The flag is a racist incendiary tool of white supremacy, and they now bowed and everybody loves it. Okay. But why can't you then, given the corporatization of Black Lives Matter, given that you've got all these companies now that are feeding money to them, you got all these international organizations now that are feeding money to them, you've got some pretty shady characters who funded them in the past, but you can't criticize that because we're being told by the great iconoclasts at universities that the hashtag trademark Black Lives Matter is something you better bow down to, child.
This is true. So back to this story at UC Berkeley specifically. So it was an open letter, and it was allegedly written by...
Allegedly.
Well,
I wouldn't say allegedly.
Well, the story says allegedly.
Right, because we can't know for sure who it is.
So you have to, unlike journalists,
yes,
actually put things out there as allegedly. So it's a UC Berkeley history professor who identifies as a person of color. And so this letter actually was out to fellow faculty members. And in this letter, the alleged history faculty member said, I am worried that writing this email publicly might lead to me losing my job and likely all future jobs in my field. In your recent departmental emails, because of course every department had to send out emails, you mentioned our pledge to diversity, but I am increasingly alarmed by the absence of diversity of opinion on the topic of the recent protests and our community response to them. Oh, how dare he.
And here's the thing. Even if this was a white guy pretending to be a black guy, if an actual black history professor said that, would it be any different? Do you think Berkeley would have condemned it any less vociferously? I don't.
Well, and here's the thing. If we know it's a UC Berkeley professor, that narrows the field. Then if we know it's a history professor, that narrows the field. And then a person of color. How many professors are there that meet all those criteria?
But look at what the university's response is.
They can find out. I'm just saying. But yes.
This is against our values. He's not asking that you stop supporting Black Lives Matter. He's not asking that you ignore the cause. He's simply saying, why can't we have a little bit of intellectual diversity when it comes to the way we deal with this? And the university says, that is against our values.
Here's what the history department actually, of course, put it on Twitter, and they condemned, obviously, the letter. It says, an anonymous letter has been circulating, purportedly written by a UCB history professor. We have no evidence that this letter was written by a history faculty member. We condemn this letter. It goes against our values as a department and our commitment to equity and inclusion.
So equity and inclusion, equality and inclusion means if you have an African-American history professor, he could have written that, but you're not letting him.
But inequity and equality aren't
right.
the same. Yeah.
My point is that they look at that letter one more time. Show that up there. What that letter just did is undercut its own message. If you're not willing to allow a history professor at your university who purports to be a minority, if you're not allowing him to challenge Black Lives Matter, then you are not committed to equity and inclusion. You are unequitable to other opinions, which a university ought to traffic in, and you are purposely not including him. And furthermore, what that statement does by the history department is it's a warning shot across the bow. If you are anybody associated with UC Berkeley history, from the graduate student teachers on to the dean of the department, the chair of the department, and you challenge us on this, we will stop you.
And I think the bigger message even out of this entire thing is what people aren't kind of gravitating towards is when he said in his original message, or he or she, whoever this professor is, that the message is clear. Black lives only matter when whites take them. Black violence is expected and insoluble, while white violence requires explanation and demands solution. Please look into your hearts and see how monstrously bigoted this formulation truly is. Bingo, bingo, bingo.
And the degree to which he is right is the degree to which they come down on him. His rightness is through the roof, which means their intolerant and very exclusive statement shows you just how right he is. And we can't have that. And we especially can't have it from one of the quote-unquote history slaves on the plantation who dares speak out against inevitably a white department's censuring of him.
Okay, on to the next story. We're going to take a look at some art professors from history to art, or really art history. So Theodore Roosevelt, we all know Teddy. We all know about the teddy bear. He was a president. He was basically a naturalist. He was all the different things. He was a governor. He's Mr. New York. And for that, even though he's the founder of the Progressive Party, he must be removed because we now know that he is so racist by being on a horse. Here's the story. Teddy Roosevelt has a statue outside the Museum of Natural History. Well, it's okay. It's coming down. Anyway, the Museum of Natural History in New York City, because he's known everything New York City. His dad actually was one of the founders of the museum. But because he's on a statue, sitting on a horse, and he's flanked by an African man and a Native American, and again, he's on a horse, that means he must be removed because that's just racist. Take a look at what these art professors say about it.
When I look at the statue, I do see a commentary about white supremacy. It has acquired that reputation as being a monument to racial supremacy.
So this guy's a professor of art, right?
He's a director of the art, blah, blah, blah.
But notice how slippery what he says is. He didn't say it's a racist statue. He says it has acquired that reputation. In other words, busybody left-wing progressives have decided it's so. The same way that they're tearing down statues of abolitionists and Abraham Lincoln and Christian advocates of black freedom in the 19th century. In other words, when you say, this is very, very frustrating, this is very dishonest for a professor to say.
Yeah.
He doesn't say it's a racist statue. He says some people think it is, and so it has to go. It has acquired. Well, who do you think it is? By that argument, anything can be taken down, including your professoriate, including your job could be removed. Because your job, well, this guy, let's start the rumor right now. I believe that he is unfit to have this job because he is unwilling to stand up for art. He is unwilling to stand up for monuments and statues simply because they have acquired a reputation. Somebody out there in the audience thinks they're racist. So consequently, we have to take them down. All right, let's start the same thing with you, clown. Let's start the rumor going around that there are those of us who think you have acquired your position on the basis of racism and exclusion, and let's get you removed from the Natural History Museum. I mean, after all, you're white, probably European, and really creepy.
That's true, but
did you see that guy?
I did, but there's another professor, of
Yes.
course, another academic
African-American professor.
There we
now,
go.
again, keep in mind,
museum
museum person.
Yeah.
According to UC Berkeley now,
Director
a
of
black
Museum
person is about to
Studies.
speak on that statue, which means there can be no critical debate. There will be no answering her statement. What she says must go.
It represents a racial hierarchy, and it pains me that that might be part of the experience entering the museum.
It might be part of the experience if people thought like me with my degree in women's studies and identity politics. It pains me that there's somebody out there who, unlike me, knows better. Somebody somewhere in the history of the world might come up to that statue, one person, and actually see that as a racial hierarchy. And did you notice that it's not just, go back to the picture, please. Did you notice that it's not just Teddy Roosevelt who is racially above the African American and the Native American? The horses, too. You are elevating a horse over living human beings of color. This is an outrage, and someone might be upset by it, and therefore, because of the acquired association with racism, we've got to take Teddy Roosevelt down.
Fact check. The horse is named Little Texas, so there is reason to take Little Texas down.
Little Tex, right?
Little Tex.
Little
Tex.
Teddy Roosevelt on the back of Little Tex.
Little Tex.
Yeah, I think it's, go back to the picture. Since I am not a history professor at Berkeley, if you take a look at that picture from the front shot, I think the African American and the Native American look really badass standing there. That's a posse right there, right? Those three, that's a posse. There's unity there when you go back to the turn of the century when this was put up there, when Teddy Roosevelt was president. This is unity in a country that wasn't unity. This is the highest ranking politician in the country willing to stand side by side with a slave and an Indian. Right? This is a big deal 100 years ago, but because it's acquired the reputation for being racist, we've got to take it down at an art museum.
Of course. Well, yes, the Natural History Museum. And again, remember that Teddy Roosevelt and New York City are synonymous, but now we have Mayor Bill de Blasio, and so he's ruling the roost. And he says that this statue is not representative of today's values and clearly presents a white man as superior to people of color. Clearly.
All right, our women's studies professor, African-American art historian, or natural historian, has found that one person who might be pained going to the museum to see that, so we've got to take it down.
Since we're on the topic of talking about statues coming down, professors, and apparently women and gender studies specifically, we're going to talk about UW-Madison, where the gender and women's studies professor named Sammy Schock, who identifies herself as a sarcastic, fat, black, disabled, queer femme, decided to tweet in support of all the rioters who actually tore down 2 statues in Madison. This happened last week. They decided that, you know what, we're going to take down not only Forward, which is the state motto, the statue of her, we're going to take down an abolitionist as well. So she decided to tweet Sammy Schock, "For folks tisk-tisking about statues coming down, let me say this. Those objects have no meaning other than as representations of the state for most young protesters. Why should they give a F about a dead white dude abolitionist when our people are in cages?"
Now, leave that up for a second. Let's take a look at that. So if the statues mean nothing, then shouldn't they be tearing down things that mean something? So what this professor is basically saying is, even though these symbols that are being torched, these things that are being ripped to shreds, these stores that are being looted, they have no real significance to our cause. We're just tearing them down because we want to. That's literally what this genius of professorial rank has to say. For folks tisk-tisking about statues coming down, let me say this. Those objects have no meaning. That's another thing. For an African-American professor of cultural studies, the whole purpose of that job is to find in objects that are innocent reasons to get upset. So her whole career has been built on making a mountain out of a molehill. Her whole career has been built on projecting onto politically neutral things that are objectionable so you can justify tearing them down. And I would also ask you this. To what degree are you willing to go on record and suggest that your people are in cages simply because they did nothing? That's another thing I'm sick of, right? The vast majority of people, of the white race, the black race, and any race, the majority of people overwhelmingly who are in jail have committed those crimes. And if the fact that they're in cages bothers you, why are you tearing down the statue of an abolitionist who helped get the chains off of your people? Because it doesn't matter. See, it's nice to have it both ways. It doesn't matter when I don't like it, and when it matters to me all the time. We'll tell you what stuff me. See how slippery and arbitrary these definitions are?
This is true. Well, she goes on to say that to make real substantive long-term change commitments or the uprisings will continue. So many people have so little to lose in the wake of the pandemic. So now they're going to ride the COVID as being
that racist disease.
Yes, and folks got time and anger and not much else to do with it but disrupt the F out of this city. And that they are doing.
Yeah, and this is Madison.
This
is the most liberal progressive town in Wisconsin. White liberal town. This is one of those progressive cities in the entire country. You just tore down the Statue of Progress, which is what you say you want. You want progress. You just tore down the symbol of progress, arguing it didn't mean anything. And if that story is not stupid enough, we got another one for you in this segment.
Yes, a principal has now been fired because you have to be this much pro Black Lives Matter, and then you got to keep going up, because if you don't, you get fired.
It's not enough to be 100% pro-Black, pro BLM. You've got to be 200%, and if that defies the laws of math, math is racist.
And it is. And
math is racist.
BLM, you have to have the little trademark, and we mean the organization. You have to be
right.
pro BLM. You can't just say that yes, Black Lives Matter. Well, we're in the land of Bernie Sanders where this happened. It's Vermont principal Tiffany Riley, who's been principal since 2015. Well, she was removed now from Windsor School by the school board after she wrote a post on her personal Facebook slightly being critical of Black Lives Matter, okay? Here's the post. Black Lives Matter. Okay. But I do not agree with the coercive measures taken to get this point across, some of which are falsified in an attempt to prove a point. She wrote, I do not think people should be made to feel they have to choose black race over human race. While I understand the urgency to feel compelled to advocate for black lives, what about our fellow law enforcement? And that's really what got them. Just because I don't walk around with a BLM sign should not mean I'm a racist. Apparently
Let's play the game of the left. Put that picture back up, Mike. Karen, not woke enough. Karen lost her job. That's tough. Karen. There. That's our homage to the critical thinking of BLM trademark people.
Outrage actually culminated in an emergency meeting. It was an emergency. We had to get her out right away because how dare we know that she is clearly racist. The Mount Ascutney School Board was unanimous in their decision to put her on paid administrative leave. And then Superintendent David Baker said they don't see any way that she's going to go forward as the principal of that building, given those comments and that statement. It's clear that the community has lost faith in her ability to lead.
Karen got canceled.
Baker continued.
We got racial justice.
Karen got canceled. I felt like a post like that with those kinds of racial overtones and what I define as pretty much outright racist in my value system. She would have never posted that.
In other words, my value system has to be yours. So it's not really my value system. It better be ours.
Time now for some real education. John James Audubon was born on April 26, 1785, and was an American ornithologist, naturalist, and a painter. He was notable for his extensive studies documenting all types of American birds and for his detailed illustrations that depicted the birds in their natural habitats. His major work, a color plate book entitled The Birds of America, 1827 to 1839, is considered one of the finest ornithological works ever completed. Audubon is also known for having identified 25 new species of birds.
Yeah, he was born Jean Rabin, and he became Audubon. He is a really interesting fella, and this is one of those books, again, we've done quite a few of these over the last few weeks, where we're trying to look at the intersection of science, classificatory science and art, and how things like an unfolding bridge or an aqueduct, these are scientific, technological advances that also are terribly, beautifully, poetically artistic. And here you have another one. This book was a game changer. Audubon's Birds of America, as Katie pointed out, it's a portal into the natural world. Printed between 1827, 1838, 39, it contains 435 life-size watercolors of North American birds, all reproduced from hand-engraved plates, and it is considered to be an archetype of wildlife education. You could make an argument here that this is the moment that that's going to give rise to people like Teddy Roosevelt, right? Teddy Roosevelt, who we saw earlier in the show, was deeply committed to preserving America's natural grandeur, its species, its taking care of its environment, creating a system of national and federal parks. Here you have a situation where these beautiful pictures, and I think this is what's so brilliant about Audubon. He is classifying. As Katie pointed out, he himself classified 25 species of bird that didn't exist or that no one knew of beforehand. He's very clinical in the way he goes about this, but if you look at those, go back and look at those pictures here. This is, of course, of a blue jay, and you can see the blue jays feeding off the egg of another bird. And what you see here is an artistic and highly subjective portrait of these birds that draws you in. The colors are staggeringly beautiful. I mean, the reality of the birds in there. That's another thing. When you think about the kinds of manuals were being painted about wildlife or zoology, the kind of books that students were studying from, they were all clinical. You did not see these animals in their habitats. Divorcing the animals from their habitats and showing them as species or as individual objects divorces them from the environment. And one of the things that Audubon does is he puts these birds back into their environment, so that with the recognition that without their environments, these birds would be meaningless. They wouldn't exist. This is a great picture here of a bird swooping in on a snake and capturing that. Try a little bit for this. One of the bald eagle, right, is remarkable in the sense that it's caught a fish, and you can just see the realism of this and the majesty. You understand why this bird was chosen to represent the burgeoning country of America. As much as Ben Franklin was probably right that maybe the turkey would have been a more fitting symbol for America, given how the turkey it fed the pilgrims. It was a bird of celebration, a bird of Thanksgiving. There's something, pardon me for all you pacifists, beautifully militant and protective about the image. Go on to the next one. The beautiful way that the bird hovers, right? The bird feeds. These paintings, the colors here actually remind me of Georgia O'Keeffe. It's the kind of colorscapes that Georgia O'Keeffe would eventually begin to paint, but all done and put into a book that was dedicated as a classificatory way of measuring and placing and exposing these creatures in their wild habitat. So hats off to Audubon. If you're an environmentalist, if you're an artist, if you're somebody who simply loves nature, Audubon is somebody who charted a different course for American wildlife, one that would go on to affect the way wildlife and environmental systems were viewed for up until this very day.
All right, as always, you can follow us on Facebook and Parler. And if you have a question for our Friday Q&A, visit freedomproject.com/askduke or send us a message on social media. And as a reminder, Freedom Project Academy's live online school is enrolling new students for just 3 more weeks. You have 3 weeks now. Make sure you request your free packet at freedomforschool.com. That's freedom, F-O-R, school.com. And now we're going to wrap things up today with our fun fact of the day. And of course, Teddy Roosevelt. He had a great memory. He could actually remember poetry from decades after reading it. Even if he just read it once, man had a brain. And he was a prolific writer. He actually wrote 35 books, roughly, and about 150,000 letters. And of course, he did his own autobiography.
I wonder if that statue to Teddy Roosevelt would still be outside of the Natural History Museum in New York if instead of a horse, the 3 amigos, the Native American, the African American, and old Teddy, were all riding a bull moose. The bull moose party, baby. And that's our show. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie. Until next time, stay moosey, my friends.